And I apologize, I forgot we needed a roll call before I called it to order.
So roll call.
Yes, roll call, please.
Susan Walke,
Present.
Don Williams,
Here.
Dick Anderson,
Here.
Chester Norikis,
Present.
Wes Ryan,
Here.
Roger Sprague,
Here.
and Kip Ward. I believe he just stepped out.
He just stepped out.
Okay, next item on the agenda is comments from citizens present. This is an opportunity for members of the audience to bring to the agency's attention any item not listed on the agenda. Comments will be limited to 5 minutes per citizen, and the city recorder will use a light system. Speakers may not yield their time to others. As a general rule, this is not a time for exchange of questions. However, at the conclusion of this agenda item, an agency member can discuss or raise questions regarding an item presented by a citizen. The chair has the authority to reduce the time allowed for comment in accordance with the number of persons present and signed up to speak. Do we have a sign-up sheet? I don't see anyone here except for staff. So the next item is minutes, and they will be available at the next meeting. Next item, special order of business presentations, property development plan. This Mr. Olson and Ms. Robertson.
Good evening. Evening. As you know, the Urban Renewal owns several pieces of property. Some are developed, such as parking lots, and some are undeveloped. And we've had discussion topics several times now about the disposition of some of the agency-owned properties. And you will see next week when we start talking about budget the importance of that at this time in the life of the Urban Renewal Agency. So at one of the past meetings, you asked us to come forth with a plan for disposition or selling some of our properties, and so that's what we've come to you with tonight, is a draft of that plan of what would be involved and how we would suggest proceeding. There's also in that plan this list of goals and objectives. We've discussed those, and certainly not all of those would apply on every piece of property we sell, but it would be a good thing to be able to come back to and see if it's meeting some of the goals that we had established for buying property and then ultimately selling it or developing it. It's our understanding that it wouldn't be that unusual for us to contact real estate agents and see and get some, and to figure out what the interest level would be of them working with us, getting the qualifications, and sort of doing like an RFP for a real estate professional that would work for us in helping us market these properties, finding people to buy them, because it'll probably be much more than just putting it on the market. I assume that we will want to have some conditions associated with the selling of the property. We may, we want some sort of a development that we've kind of identified that we'd like to see there, and we have that opportunity since we own those pieces of property. And so they would be able to help us a little bit more in some of those issues as well. So while we're working on that, as we're working on that, we can also be working on figuring out exactly what it is that we do have for sale. Like I said, we have 2 pieces of property that currently don't have a legal description associated with them. On Southeast 32nd Street, there was, I think we ended up buying about 6 pieces of property in there. And so there's just remnants of about 3 of those pieces of property that are left. And so part of the process with donating that property to ODOT for their project on our streets, which now become our streets, the remnant that's left, as part of that process anyway, they will be writing up that job description. We understand that work will be done.
The legal description?
The legal description, yeah, I'm sorry, thank you. The legal descriptions for what property is actually left to sell. And we understand that work will be completed in June, and we'll be following up again with them periodically to see how they're coming with that. In addition to the other piece of property that's at south, I guess it would be northeast 1st Street, Hostetler Park, part of that Hostetler Park property, That's just one parcel there that the agency owns, and then there's one parcel that open space owns. But the one parcel that the agency owns, we would want to do a partition there, I assume, so that we wouldn't be selling the entire piece of property. We'd be keeping the part that's down at lake level and selling the part that's up on the highway level. So those are the two items that we could get started on right away. We also assume that we will have development agreements, as I mentioned, of some sort written for each of the sales, outlining what conditions of the sales there might be. So Mr. Appicello will likely be involved in that task. We do have an example of a development agreement that I've used in the past with the city of Medford. And so we provided that outline, and there, I think it's Exhibit B in your packet materials, of what an outline of a development agreement would look like. They're pretty extensive, but they encompass all of the actions that are taken by the seller and the buyer, and timelines and those sorts of things. So I provided that so they kind of have an idea of what was involved. So that was sort of my introduction. Allison was going to talk a little bit about the properties.
Okay, so the 5 parcels that we're considering at this time are the Northwest 15th Street lot. And as you can see from the pictures, you've seen these before, but just to remind people, we did a pretty significant street rebuild there, with Public Works doing some work initially, and then us coming in and doing the street and wider sidewalks. And then following that street improvement project, we partnered with ODOT and DLCD, the Department of Land Conservation and Development, and received a TGM, or Transportation Growth Management Grant, to look at feasibility for what could go on that property. And you've all seen that report as well, and I've got it in the office if you're interested in seeing it again. They did some concept sketches, they met with the community, and this is a rendering or an example of one type of development that could go on that property. Again, trying to increase the commercial activity on that street, since it's a connection between a lot of the lodging on the oceanfront and then the highway commercial. The second property that Kurt already mentioned, where we would like to pursue a partition there, is the Northeast 1st Street property, otherwise known as Hostetler Park. And that would be property that's nearest the highway. That would be the obvious property for development. And as you know, the site has a great history, a lot of activity, it's very visible, and when we purchased it, it had an approved site plan to build some motel units, and that's kind of when the agency stepped in and purchased the property. You can see where the footprint would have been for that, also would have been along the highway, so we would be kind of carrying on with that.
Do you have the prices we paid for these properties? Can you let us know as part of your presentation what those are for each one?
Sure, we don't have that for this presentation, but
I think in fact, they are listed in your Exhibit A. There are property attribute sheets for each property, and I think that the property is listed.
This one says $475,000 in 2003.
Yes, okay, that probably sounds about
Well,
right.
you got values, but I didn't see what we paid for them.
Okay, I'll have to look and see.
Oh.
I'll look at that while she's purchase price.
I think it is in here.
Mr. Olson, I didn't see an Exhibit B with a example development agreement.
So it's after, there's 5 sheets of the 5 properties, and then the very last 2 pages is Exhibit B that has that table of contents.
Oh,
It looks like an outline of
I
some
see
sort.
it now. Thank you.
A very long list, no pictures.
Get it.
And then, thanks, I did see that for Northeast 1st Street, the Hostetler Park, it does say purchase price $475,000, and that was in 2003.
Entire parcel?
Yes. Not including the open space portion, which we did not purchase.
I am curious.
Uh-huh.
On that particular piece of property, because I was on the planning commission, when that first was proposed to be a motel, and we fought tooth and toenail never to have it turned into a motel because of a bunch of environmental concerns and so on. And I'm really curious why we are now promoting it as that kind of a thing. I thought the whole concept of us buying that piece of property was to keep it as a park. I thought that's what we originally planned when we bought that piece of property. And I'm really curious why we are now looking at selling it to a commercial enterprise that would fly in the face of exactly what we were trying to prevent. So I'm really curious.
Yeah, Kurt might have some more to add on that. I wasn't here at that time, but, you know, it would be just nearest the highway. It would be minimal impact, and it would be commercial. It wouldn't be motel, as far as I know. But
Yeah, and the agency likely wouldn't have bought it if we didn't think that there was some potential, redevelopment potential for it. If it was just going to be a park, then the city probably would have been the likely purchaser of it, like the open space. They did the open space.
Mr. Ryan, can you tell me when was that?
I was 20-some-odd years ago. But
2000.
the whole point of it was that area was, at that time, flooded frequently, and that we felt it was a bad use of that property. We tried to purchase the property at that time. The city tried to. The owner at that time would not sell. Later on, a chunk of it was bought for open space, and then the city acquired the rest of it. And I understood that there was a little strip right along the highway that might be developed, but for the most part, it was going to retain its natural condition. I mean, that's what I understood. And I had, as long as I've stopped you in your presentation, I have the same issue with 15th Street. We have an issue with parking in the Ocean Lake area to begin with. And I understand that Northwest 15th parking lot is not utilized very much, mainly because nobody knows it's there. It's signed pretty poorly. And that is a difficult turn toward the ocean, which is one of the reasons why 15th doesn't get as much use as it probably should. But to take what little bit of public parking we have and convert that into a commercial enterprise just doesn't make sense to me. If we are trying to eventually wean the cars off of Highway 101, which would be optimal, we're going to need all those parking spaces. And if we sell all of it to a commercial whatever, then, you know, then we're basically screwed.
Pardon me, Mr. Ryan, I think we're talking about the vacant lot next to the C something
We are
motel.
talking about the Northwest 15th parking lot, aren't
No.
you?
no, we're talking about the vacant parcel that's
Okay,
closer
because-
to Harbor.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
It looked like the Northwest 15th parking lot to me.
It's on the same side of the street as the parking lot
Okay.
and facing
So,
north. So
my apologies on
yeah.
that.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
But speaking of that lot, Allison, what would it take to create an interim parking lot before sale? Is that a possibility? You have it listed here on the.
Yeah, we've talked about that over the years. You know, we did concept meetings before we did the design of the street improvement, then we did the construction of the street improvement, and then we did more concept conversations with the TGM grant with what would be envisioned there. And parking definitely is a hot topic. We've done in the past parking studies, and Mr. Ryan's right that, you know, it's kind of a catch-22 with creating enough interest on that street to get people to go there for something other than the beach. And so, you know, that's definitely some detail we can be talking about and fleshing out as we move forward on any of these purchases or transactions with developers. But, you know, we always have the ability of doing interim uses with any of our properties. But no, we haven't talked about doing that. I think it's more envisioned that it would be a nearer term, and we wouldn't want to invest in the parking lot construction when we could move straight to development. While we have talked about our other parking lots that may or may not be used at different times of the year, we could always use those. You know, in the past, Kurt's talked about air rights. We could always build above a parking lot and get more commercial on the second or third floor, or residential even. I mean, those properties are not at their highest and best use in a longer-term scenario, but for now, they seem to be working fine, so I don't know if that answered your question.
Thank you.
The Nelscott Commons property, southeast 32nd, Kurt mentioned this one. We're still kind of in a holding pattern, waiting for ODOT to finish their legal description, see what we have left. And that's across the street from the Nelscott Business District, next to the antique store and the new southeast 32nd Street. And here's a picture of that site. You can see it's mostly treed, and there's some bank just to the south part of that property. We also, I think it was 2009 that we did some work on concepts with a designer at that time, showing kind of a maximum build out and minimum build out, and this is one of the concepts that came out of that project, where there would be commercial at the highway and then parking in the back. Here's one picture of what it could look like that kind of speaks to the historic building types that are already present in Nelscott. And then last but not least, Taft, Southwest 51st Street. We've assembled properties over time, as you know, and that one is also waiting and ready to move along. There's a picture of the Taft vision. When we're talking about the Weather Center, that's a little image of the Weather Center concept. And then the city manager asked us to please include the Taft Nelscott D Lake Fire District property, because that has a building on it and may have a different use that you might like to consider as well. Are there any other questions?
Madam Chair, in those write-ups where you've got the sales price or purchase price, it's aged information. First, this is the question, where you've spun off, I'm thinking of the Nelscott piece, ODOT's taken some and everything else. That might be a different, how do I go with this? Looking at the value of that sales price or relevant to what's there today may not match. And then we've got a value, and is the value anywhere near current? Or what year did the value come in?
The values have sort of been best guesses from our perspective.
Okay.
And you also have to consider in there that the properties are likely to be sold at a discount because they'll have conditions with them. So that plays into the value too.
But let's go to the the northeast one by D River Lake. That's the 475 or something like that, and had a smaller value. Are we talking that we purchased more property there than what we would be utilizing for, or open up for potential commercial use?
Yeah, exactly. That was for the entire piece that we purchased, right.
I guess that's where I'm looking for the kind of relationship between what we bought and what we're putting out this time for purchase. That helps.
So they're just best guesses, and we haven't even got too serious about what conditions there might be.
Just, Madam Chair, another question, I guess formality. Do we, like city, have to declare property surplus? Does urban renewal, or is it part of our mission that we're okay, we buy, and thus it's just assumed, or is there an extra step that we have to go through and declare property surplus before we sell it?
To dispose of property, you have to make findings under Chapter 271 and follow a public hearing process. 271 has two types of findings. It's not necessary for public use, or it furthers the public interest. So I think we're probably in that second category when we're talking about a URA property trying to facilitate a certain kind of development.
But there will be a process at some point to so action. Okay, that's what I want to make sure.
Whenever we give up an interest in real property, whether it's an easement or even a long-term lease, 221-725 requires a public hearing unless you've adopted some alternative procedures in 221-727. So,
Madam Chair,
Mr. Sprague.
is that property that's up on the screen there, the old fire station, is that two separate lots, or is that just a single lot? It has the line separating those?
Yeah, I think it's two separate lots.
Because currently the building is being used by Backpack, and it's very valuable to them. Is there any process whereby we can donate the building to Backpack with conditions that if they should ever dissolve, that it comes back to the city?
May I respond to that?
Pardon?
May I respond to that?
Yes.
That answer would be dependent on what you wanted to use the building for. What is the alternate use of that building? If there is no other alternate use, that might be a good idea. But if there is value in that building to use it as some sort of an economic or redevelopment, then you may want to look at other arrangements to work with the Backpack program.
The building's in terrible shape, and it leaks badly.
There's
And I don't think anybody would want to do anything with that building.
Your Honor, under Oregon law, you can dispose of public property, agency property, for no compensation to a not-for-profit organization that meets certain criteria in Chapter 271. I can't remember the subsection, but generally they're providing some kind of social program, like, for example, a women's resource center, that kind of operation. So maybe the back program would fit that.
The Backpack program most definitely would fit that.
The 501c3,
And just to remind you, that one is city-owned, so that would be,
not urban renewal.
right, we'd be happy to help with that conversation, but
I'd like to pursue that if the council or the agency agrees.
Here. I wouldn't have an opinion yet. I'd want to look into that a little bit more.
Madam Chair, I noticed in our write-up, we've got a RFQ and an RFP kind of process. So I'm thinking next steps. You've done a nice job of kind of what potentially could be on some of these properties. And you talked of perhaps talking to a realtor, listing as next steps. Is the RFP, RFQ process a way to further flesh out potential that could be on that site? For example, I guess I'm kind of in fear, and I am a control freak, so I apologize. But we market a property, and we're not quite sure wide parameters what could be there, and we get a sale. Developer tells us one thing and does something different, or better yet, he agrees to whatever nice picture we paint, loosey-goosey, and it changes. I understand a development agreement, but I guess I'm avoiding legal battles and everything else, trying to get as much sense up front what the end product's going to be, and it may not be what we've painted the picture to be, but we still like it. So how do we flesh out the creativity of a developer, builder, potential purchaser? Is it through this RFP, RFQ process?
I think it'll be a collaborative between staff and the agency and some professional real estate help. They would be able to have a better idea of what type of interest there is in those types of properties and what might be the highest and best use that we hadn't thought of. So I think it's kind of a process in itself.
So before we go out, actually list it and invite offers. Some of that will.
I think it would also, we can say what we want, but we can also structure it so that we're open to other ideas that we may not have considered. And if we focus on qualities and really emphasize that, I think we'll have a better outcome than if we just say, X shop that sells T-shirts or something.
Good.
Madam Chair? So would the next step be putting an RFQ, RFP out for a realtor?
Yes, that's what we're suggesting.
Thank you.
Need a motion for that?
Do we need a motion to take that action, or is that just the process? We've already moved to move these properties, haven't we, or take a look at, and the next step would be gathering more information.
I think with putting out the RFQ or RFP, it would be helpful to have a motion just that you direct staff to do that, just so we're clear on what our next steps would be.
I'd move to direct staff to do an RFP, RFQ for Realtor listing.
Second?
We have a motion second to direct staff to prepare an RFQ, RFP to get a realtor to market the properties that we've described. All right. Those in favor?
Discussion.
Aye.
Discussion.
Any discussion?
Yeah, just briefly, if we could just outline for people who are listening at home what an RFP and an RFQ are.
Sure, an RFP is a request for proposals, and an RFQ is a request for qualifications. And the RFQ is you're asking for people to submit their qualifications based on what you are needing in terms of services and find their experience. And then an RFP, you're asking for the same thing, but you're asking for a price that goes with it. So often that's, an RFP is with bidding for construction. An RFQ is often for design or other professional services where you really are wanting to make sure you have the right person before you talk about price, which is then negotiated later.
Thank you, that's all I had.
So we'll vote again. Those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Hearing none. Thank you. And, we have no public hearings scheduled. We have no resolutions. Any agency member comments? Further comments? Meeting's adjourned. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, we do need to wait 5 minutes in order for the whole audit or video thing to get set up.
You got until 6:10.
Sorry,
Started late, ended late. This is not a good start to your reign.
Okay.
whole entire projector.
I don't think we need that.
You guys have it
It's
taken care of.